Welcome to Nameless Debate Radio, where radioactivity is contagious.
My buddies here, Bucky and Trini, they both have beaten you, I guess, and they'd like to see me do it. So I've come here to beat you in a debate. What would you like to debate?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't agree that your buddies beat me, but they can think that if they like. How about we debate what truth is? Let's see how you do on that.
What truth is? Okay, what is your current stance on truth?
No, I asked you, what do you think truth is? Because I actually know, so let's see how you do.
Well, that seems actually inaccurate. I think I asked you.
Well, I mean, you asked me what I'd like to debate about. I told you. Are you saying it's not okay for me to ask you to tell you first? Because it doesn't seem reasonable to say that you're going to debate me on something you won't be able to argue with. I'd like to hear your opinion first.
My opinion on what truth is?
Yes.
Well, truth would be fact as we know it.
Could you elaborate a bit for me?
Concepts that would fall under the umbrella of objectivity.
And what's objectivity mean?
Objectivity, something that, I don't know, it would have to be something that is provable without bias or subjective thought or opinion.
Incorrect. So you just described. No, you just described.
I can prove that I'm correct. That I'm correct there actually, and I'll post it here in the main chat for you.
If you say so. What you just described was empirical truth. Okay, that's not truth. I asked you to describe empirical. I asked you to describe truth, and then I said, could you define for me objective? And you said something that is measured.
I didn't say anything about measurements.
You definitely used a subjective active word. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was either measure or if it had something to do with subjectivity, and I contested on that basis. Well,
objectivity in and of itself, by definition, by both definitions, they can't be the same thing. It would violate the law of non-contradiction to say that subjectivity and objectivity can exist within the same concept.
No, it wouldn't.
It's either objective truth or it is subjective.
Incorrect.
There's only
Incorrect.
Okay, can you tell me something that is objective and subjective as a truth?
I can't tell you anything about what is objectively true, but I can tell you that objectivity entails subjectivity, and that is not contradictory. What we subjectively believe to be true is generally characterized by a consistency with empirical observation, right? And that consistency is how we justify saying that it's true, but it is not objectively true, because what objective means is what exists as it exists independently of subjective perception, evaluation, or observation.
Well, that's what I said.
Okay, so what's objective?
That's actually what I said.
No, it isn't actually. Yeah, well, it's recorded,
yes, we can look back,
so it's not what you said. I'm telling you.
What I described as objectivity, you said that it is only an empirical truth as I described it, but what you just described was very close to what I said.
Yes.
I said that an objective truth is the absence, essentially, of subjectivity, any bias, or any... Okay, feel free. I'll let you continue, because I haven't actually heard what your definition of truth is, and I'm curious.
Yeah, so what you actually said was that objectivity and truth, specifically, it was about truth. You said that what is objective is what's true, and then you said that what's objective is what we observe independently of those subjective biases you described. But the definition of truth has got nothing to do with subjective observation, evaluation, or perception. That's the whole point. What's true is true independently. No, it isn't. We can check. What's true is true independently of subjective perception, evaluation, or observation. That's what's true. It has nothing to do with your subjective ability to articulate or understand it. Nothing at all.
Oh, sorry. I was messaging Felix. Felix, if you're still in here, would you mind checking the recording? So that way you can confirm.
I don't think he can check it during.
No. Well, that's fine. We'll check after the fact, and we'll have plenty of answers. So essentially, your definition of truth, again, is something that it is the absence of subjectivity, is what I'm saying. It is not subjective.
No, incorrect.
Because subjective would have essentially just your personal feelings and thoughts and your opinions treated as truth, is essentially what subjectivity would be.
No.
Objectivity would be something that you could that would be able to stand up to falsifiability in the scientific method, correct?
No, objectivity has nothing to do with subjective falsification, and I said that.
Well,
okay,
wait, subjective falsification. Could you define that for me?
Yes, it's the subjective process of evaluating subjective models against the empirical data and saying, well, the empirical data, this is a subjective model, so we should change it.
Okay. So is there some sort of other truth? Do you have 100% absolute truths available that you could use as examples that would exist in a plane beyond empirical truth that you're contesting is not objectivity?
No, but I think what I'm contesting is the fact
Okay.
that, for instance, one of the things that you said verbatim just now was that objectivity is the absence of subjectivity, and that isn't correct, actually, because the objective world contains subjectivity. Obviously, here we are. Okay, objectivity has to do with what actually is as it is, unaffected by the things that you perceive about it or think of it. Okay, so the fact that you subjectively evaluate it to be a certain way or perceive it to be a certain way doesn't change how it actually is. It is a certain way, and that is the way it is, no matter what you think of it. And that doesn't exclude subjectivity in any fundamental way,
It does, in
not at
fact.
all.
So
No, it doesn't.
I'll explain why. If you say that something is objective as a truth as opposed to subjective, an objective truth, and you can, again, check my definition, objective is almost synonymous with unbiased and impartial. And in fact, I believe the synonyms are listed for it on the definition I gave you. That means that in objectivity, you cannot use or even factor in your own feelings, your thoughts, and observations, which we as humans, we are not perfect observation machines. And in fact, most humans see the world differently. They experience things differently. It's a great example is mental health issues. Someone with bipolar or depression can experience much lower lows in their emotional stability than a normal functioning person with no mental health issues. But because of that mental illness, their subjective feeling, their subjective experience of these feelings and these lows is essentially just exaggerated, is the word I'm looking for here. Like, that's a subjective. However, an objective would be gravity. Okay, if I drop something off a roof, if everybody in the world drops something off their roof right now, it will indeed fall and eventually hit the ground. That is an objective truth because gravity is simply a law that we can test and prove. And that is the extent of our provability. And this is why I asked you earlier, do you have any examples of 100% absolute truths? I was going to trap you into saying yes and then press you, and then when you didn't have one, I would then explain that objectivity is going to be defined by how we can essentially prove something in a neutral way, in an unbiased way, to the best of our abilities as human beings. So, that being said, subjectivity cannot exist in objectivity. It violates the law of non-contradiction because objectivity calls for an unbiased and a lack of feeling or opinion within this truth. So an empirical truth in and of itself is objectivity.
So I have a couple of points for you quickly. Now, first of all, I'm sure you recognize that a synonym means a word that has a similar meaning but not exactly the same. So you can't say that because the words that you're saying are equivalent are synonyms, they are thus equivalent. That is actually factually incorrect. There wouldn't be different words if they were equivalent. Okay, they're synonyms for a reason. They have similar meanings, but that isn't the same as them having the same meaning, and they're not equivalent in practice. Okay, the second point is that what you're describing when you say objectivity is a subjective viewpoint that is attempting to emulate objectivity, right? You're describing the elimination subjectively of the biases which we tend to characterize subjectivity with, because that makes our reasoning flawed. What I'm saying is that's not objectivity, okay? That is called logical positivism, otherwise known as empirical science. It's an effort to remove the subjective biases that we use to reason about our environment, okay? And they produce truths that we propose to be objective, but we propose them subjectively, and anything which is proposed subjectively cannot actually be objective, because what is objective is what is actually true, independent of your postulation of it. Okay, you can say that your subjective postulation is consistent with what is objectively true, and that's a proposition, but you cannot say that any opinion you hold is objectively true, because you have no way of proving that to be
good
certain.
Points, and I'm happy you brought up exactly how we go about getting these imperialistic truths, and that these are propositions when we start, right? We make educated guesses on what's going to happen. Who was it? Newton? He made a few educated guesses and then test them. So before he tested them and proved that his educated guesses, his subjective reasoning, before he tested it, that was purely subjective. It's his opinion, it's his thoughts. After he tested it, he was able to prove that without my bias, without any outside factors or hindrances on my test, I was able to prove that this is an objective fact. I was able to prove that the laws of inertia work a certain way. I was able to prove, things of that nature. There's reasons that they call them Newton's laws, not Newton's opinions, despite the fact that he started in a subjective mindset with a proposition. He then was able to take those propositions, test them, and prove them to be objective fact, and that is why we call them law now, because I can go out and test any one of those laws any way I want, and it will hold true. It holds up to falsifiability. And as humans, that is exactly how we get to objective truths. That is the definition of objective, because falsifiability is not biased. There's no bias or, opinion or any sway towards one side or the other when you go through the scientific method and test things under sterile test conditions. You will have facts. You will have exactly how things react in nature, in the universe. That's all it is.
Quickly. All right, let's just have a look at the wiki post that Felix used for objectivity, all right? So let's look at objectivity philosophy, all right? And then let's look at objectivity science, and let's admit that those are actually slightly different definitions, okay? And the philosophical one is the one to which I'm referring, and you're referring to scientific objectivity, which is empirical truth, not truth itself, okay? Because truth is actually something that is philosophically defined, not scientifically, all right? So in philosophy, objectivity means the property of being independent from perception, all right? And in science, it means the goal of eliminating personal biases in the practice of science, all right? So when we say, for instance, that we can demonstrate something objectively, what we generally mean is that it's not a product of our subjective opinion, but rather it's a conclusion that we can derive from the application of empirical philosophy to the observable environment through the experimentation that falsifies theories, okay? And if we say that a theory has not been falsified yet, then it is sufficiently true to use. Now, do you admit then that theories and things like gravity, are they certain in your opinion? Certain is like immutable, could not be wrong, irrefutable.
Could not be wrong. There's no such thing.
Yes, so you say certainty is impossible. Is that accurate?
I'm saying that there are no 100% absolute certainties, and you wouldn't be able to prove any exist or ever have.
So you are saying that certainty is impossible, just so that I'm sure I've got you correctly.
It's certainty to a degree. There are different degrees of certainty. I can't eliminate the concept of certainty during this debate. I won't do that.
I think you might mean confidence, okay? There are different degrees of confidence. Certainty means absolute surety. If you're certain of something, you know for a fact it could never be false.
Sorry, I'm just looking up the definition of certain right now. Maybe I need a refresher, but... Sorry, I was eating grapes, that's why. If you hear chewing, that's why. Okay. Yeah, the definition of certain is known for sure or established beyond doubt. I can use that in a courtroom and get away with murder.
No. That is your proposition that you can establish legally beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, the word reasonable is there for a reason. Okay, so what I'm saying is I can always philosophically conjecture a way to make you doubt your knowledge. That's what Descartes showed. Okay, that's what Descartes' demon was about. That's why Descartes developed the view called Cartesian skepticism. All right, because he showed that no matter what you observe about the empirical, okay, everything that you think about it could just be false, right? Because we can postulate philosophically that there could be something outside the system that is contriving to convince you of everything that you think is true, even though it's not. Do you admit to that?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. What was that last thing you said?
Yeah, so there could be an outside force outside the system that you exist in that is contriving to make you believe the things that you think are true. It makes you believe that they're true, even though they're actually not. It's the powers of a demon, let's say.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, you're using the...
Yes.
I can see you've taken, the skepticism class 101.
No,
so
I
what
have
you're trying to essentially say... Okay, well then you've probably read a little bit about it, but I'm very well versed in the Cartesian skepticism. Essentially what you're trying to do is say that I am not able to say anything's objective by my definition because you're challenging that we as humans actually do not know whether we're right or wrong. We don't even know if there's anything that we don't know. That's the basic idea behind it. So the problem with that is that to assert that, you would then have to prove that that theory, that subjective theory, mind you, that has not been proven and has almost no backing, you would have to prove that that is both accurate and a truth above all that we already know, and it is a better form of finding truth than the empirical data.
I wouldn't
be able
actually
to
have to
prove.
do that, because I'm not proposing that empirical science doesn't work. I'm not proposing that this thought experiment is true. I'm saying the fact that one can postulate the thought experiment demonstrates that no matter what you think you know, you could always be wrong, and that is why you are forever uncertain. That is why certainty is impossible in a philosophical sense. You can never be certain, okay? That's a fact of the matter, all right? It was established. It has been established historically, all right? So when you say then something is proven, what you mean to say is that it has been demonstrated empirically and substantiated with a sufficient amount of evidence to justify the amount of confidence you afford to it, which is almost certainty.
So in that case, that goes back to exactly what I was saying in the beginning, that there are no 100% absolutes. So by that logic, we then deem objectivity to be the greatest likelihood, technically. In the loosest, broadest way I can say that, to not get too technical on you, it's essentially what is the most likely.
No, look,
So when we look at gravity, again, what's most likely? When I drop something off a roof, it is going to fall. It is the least likely that it will stay in one place.
You
right?
realize I don't disagree with that.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is that you would then have to present to me something that is better than my stance and prove that it is better than my stance.
No, all I'm saying is that I don't think you understand. Okay, so when you propose something to be objective, you do so subjectively. And because subjectivity is fundamentally an uncertain thing, everything that you propose to be objectively true is uncertain. Okay, so to use the word objective doesn't make any sense, because for one, it's being articulated subjectively. It isn't like it's not derived directly from the fabric of nature. You are articulating a proposition that you are saying follows from what we can observe. Okay, and you might be wrong. That's a fact, all right? So you're saying something that you propose to be propositional truth. You propose that it's true objectively, all right? But you can't check that it is true objectively. So then to say, I know that this is true objectively, is a fallacy, because you cannot know such a thing. Epistemologically, it is impossible.
What you're then going to do in this debate, you would put us at a stalemate by saying that nothing is certain.
No.
Absolutely nothing is truth, when we are in a debate about what is technically the best truth. In my opinion, as I laid out for you, and I'm happy you already knew the term, empirical data is the best dictator of what is true or not. And the reason is something that you brought up, that I can't have evidence for it. When in reality, objective, the way I'm using it, is when there is so much corroborating evidence that it is undeniable to me through any available or possible method that is within our planet. No one in our race as humans has found any other way to falsify better, to corroborate any theories or subjective proposals, as you call them. There's no better way than empirical data. And like I said earlier, just because you started with a subjective proposition, an educated guess, doesn't mean that you can't then find corroborating evidence for that educated guess, prove yourself right objectively. And I'm going to keep using that word, because to be objective, you don't need to be 100% absolute truth.
Let's look at the.
You do.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, we already linked one.
That,
okay, Felix asked the Wikipulse for one. Okay, I'm talking about the philosophical definition of objectivity. Okay, yes, it does have to be. Well, that's okay, but then you need to say empirical truth, empirical objective truth. Okay, because no, you haven't. You keep calling it objectively true, and not just that, but you said that you can prove it. Now, can you describe to me how you can prove something beyond any doubt?
Beyond any doubt? There is no such thing.
Exactly. So when you say that you prove that it is objective, you say, I demonstrate beyond any doubt that it is immutably true, irrefutable, okay? And that actually isn't a possible thing for you to do. The only thing that you can do is say, this is the best guess, as you said. This is the way that we have come to know things so far. This is effective, and we should use it. But in your language, you can't then call it objectively true, because that is technically inaccurate in a philosophical sense. And epistemologically, it's not a valid or supportable position. Well, actually,
what this is essentially what is truth, And my definition had nothing to do with philosophy. In fact, my definition was, what can I look at? Because you wanted to use observation. So I said, okay, can I look at any hard numbers? Can I look at any facts? If you want to use us as humans as observation tools, which I then followed up with by saying, we are not perfect observation machines. Even if we had the perfect objective truth in front of us, we could actually still misconstrue it. Every single human, no matter how different, could actually all misconstrue it. That is also a possibility. So what you're appealing to is an infinite possibility. But the problem with that is that since there is an infinite possibility, and there is always a degree of doubt that is reasonable to some degree if you want to use philosophy, essentially what you would say then is that there is no truth. Because by my definition, objectivity and truth would go hand in hand because I can prove something. As far as I'm concerned,
that might be true as far as you're concerned, but I'm saying that we've been talking about truth for a long time, and most of the people who've written and thought about it don't actually agree with you. Now, so let me ask you a question, okay? Do you know where we got empirical science from?
Do I know?
Yes, do you know?
Let's just say no.
Okay, where we got it from is philosophy. Philosophy, okay? In the beginning, science was natural philosophy. It didn't have differentiated fields. It was just thinking about the world, okay? And then, eventually, after a long time, we came up with a really good model of natural philosophy, which we called empirical science. And further than that, there's actually a slightly more technical definition of that philosophy, which is logical positivism. Okay, so logical positivism is the philosophy of science. Okay, so when you say that something is scientifically true, you have to understand that truth is not defined by science. Truth is defined by philosophy. Okay, truth has always been defined by philosophy, right? And the only reason that we ever came of truth that allows us to demonstrate things empirically was that philosophers made their definitions of truth better and better until we came up with a good model that helped us to produce like predictions that were accurate. All right, so like when you say like you're relegating the words like objectivity and truth to science, I don't think you understand that necessarily puts them in the domain of philosophy.
Unfortunately, it doesn't, and I'm going to tell you why. So the reason this is not a philosophical debate, one, science, if it evolved from philosophy as you're trying to suggest here, the problem with that is philosophy is still around and it serves different purposes. Science serves the purpose of getting to objective truth. Do you understand why science is around right now? Do you know where science originated?
I do, yes. I just told you.
Yes, philosophy, right?
Yes.
Do you know why it was made into a field? Do you know why it's coveted by humans?
Because it's effective.
Okay. Would you say that you would be able to prove all the things that science can prove without using science and only using philosophy?
Well, no, of course not. But the thing you're saying that, listen to me, like you're forming an artificial distinction between science and philosophy, all right? Like read the bottom definition here.
It's not artificial if we agree.
We don't agree. Read the bottom definition, okay? If I cede you that distinction, then we agree. But I don't cede you the distinction, right? And so what I'm saying is, if you read logical positivism...
Wait, hold on. So what I said was, can you prove what science can prove in the absence of science using philosophy? You said, of course not, I can't.
No, but
the reason you said that was because you can't get to those truths, those truths, as we call them, with philosophy.
Okay.
Because you can't test philosophy. You won't be able to. Not like science.
All right.
There's no falsifiability within philosophy outside of maybe, and I'm going to give you a very big liberty here and say this, maybe you could use philosophy to understand social truths. Maybe. And that's a big old maybe. So what I'm saying, again, is that this is a debate over who understands truths better and who out of the two of us has a better method to get to truth. And what I'm able to demonstrate is that you can't even get to the same truths that science already has using your philosophical method. Because your philosophy has nothing on science. There's nothing to it. There's no way to falsify that.
Let's just deconstruct that for a second. Do you know what the philosophy of science is? Can you tell me it?
The philosophy of science.
Correct.
Finding truth. Testing.
No.
Actually, technically,
incorrect.
the scientific method in and of itself is the philosophy.
Testing is okay. Correct, but what is it called? Testing was good, but that's not the answer. It's called verificationism. Why don't you read the main chat?
Falsifiability.
Stop. It's called verificationism, okay?
Mhm.
That is the idea that you can verify truths empirically, all right? It's a philosophical theory, all right? And when you apply that philosophical theory, the fact that it works and that you decide you're going to call it science doesn't mean that it's not a philosophical theory. It is, okay? You are assuming things in order to perform science, and I can outline what those assumptions are for you right now, all right? But if you looked in the chat, you would see logical positivism. Maybe you should take a little bit to read the page because you are fundamentally wrong about this, okay? Philosophy is how we define truth, okay? Philosophy produced a specific kind of philosophy, which is called logical positivism, which has as its central component falsification and verification, okay? And those are philosophical tenets that science uses to apply to disparate fields, right? And the fields have specific variables, but the reason that it's all called science is that the philosophy is the same every time, all right? And the philosophy isn't called science. It's called the philosophy of science, and it has a technical name, as all things in science tend to. The technical name is logical positivism, and it is, technically speaking, a philosophy. Look at the link.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was getting another grape. So the reason you're wrong here, the problem is that, again, it goes back to what the premise of this debate was. It seems that you're kind of forgetting. You're sidestepping that if maybe my intuition's wrong, but it seems like you're sidestepping.
Yeah,
but
your intuition is wrong.
We're talking about, what we're talking about is who gets to their truth better. At the end of the day, that was the premise of this debate. I get to my truth through science, and I can prove that my science is just overall more effective, as you said, at getting to those truths than philosophy. If you want to take a philosophical stance, then please tell me how you will prove any of Newton's laws through philosophy.
I'm just going to quickly, you said you can prove your truths through science, and I just wanted to quickly say
I said they're more effective. I will be able to make my truths appear, and not even appear more likely, I will make my truths objectively more likely through the use of science and the scientific method, whereas philosophy will not allow that.
Okay, so
in fact, philosophy... Okay. No, I'll let you go. I want to hear more of this.
So actually, you literally used the word proof. You can't equivocate on that. It's being recorded. I heard you say proof. That is what you said, all right? So have you ever heard of something called Gödel's incompleteness theorems?
Yes.
Yes. So could you explain to me what they mean?
What?
What is it? First of all, what is it? Could you just tell me what the noun means?
I don't like your tone.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll explain for you since it seems like you don't know. Otherwise, I think you would probably.
Well, I'm not sure how you got to that conclusion. Can you prove that to me?
No, I don't need to. I'm just saying it seems likely to me.
Okay.
Okay, so just let me continue for a sec, all right? I'll tell you what Gödel's incomplete theorems are. Oh, go ahead then. You just said, no, I will.
No, I said I will let you.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Yeah, cool. Awesome, yep. So Gödel's incompleteness theorems were developed by a mathematician called Kurt Gödel, all right? Less than 100 years ago, I think, maybe a little over. Pretty recently, in the course of mathematics, historically.
Math's actually a science, if you were wondering, by the way.
Actually, math is a technical discipline focused on definitions and meanings, all right? So let me just continue, all right? So what he demonstrated in these incompleteness theorems was he found a way to show through the formal mathematical systems we all use that proving things to be true with a mathematical system is impossible. You cannot prove something to be sufficiently true, and the reason that you can't prove anything to be sufficiently true is that the actions that you use to build the system by which you perform a proof cannot be verified by the system.
Okay. So I like your definition. It's great. It's accurate in
my definition.
In my humble opinion. So I just wanted to kind of ask you something though. So one, you used a mathematician.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's a science, flat out. Mm-hmm. Number two, the problem with what you're saying is that you said, well, how does this prove this? And you're going on about how there's no 100% truth.
Correct.
When we agreed to that in the premise of this debate, right? Well, what's more likely? Something philosophy says. If philosophy says that the stars light the sky, or if I can use science to say, well, stars are actually these big hot balls, and that light's actually reaching us millions of years later. Which one's more provable,
I'm confused. I'm confused about the dichotomy you presented. You present Science and
Well,
philosophy as disparate entities, and I object to that premise. The premise that science and philosophy are disparate is false. Read the link in the main chat. It links to Wikipedia, where Wikipedia tells you about the philosophy of science, okay? Science is the application of logical positivism to specific fields of inquiry, okay? All of these fields of inquiry are different, but only insofar as logical positivism is the way that we analyze them are they called science. Okay, so any product of science that you can say, wow, science is more accurate. Well, actually, what you need to realize is that that is inherited accuracy from philosophy. It's philosophical accuracy because science is philosophical.
You had a very coherent
when you say
point going there, and what you just fell. You fell over.
I didn't. Let me continue talking, man. I wasn't done. All right.
Okay.
The reason that the products of science counters the products of philosophy is that there is no fundamental difference between science and the philosophy of science. And if you think that there is, I want you to justify that for me right now.
Got it. So the reason they're very different, one is much more effective. Two, one I can actually.
No, I said the philosophy of science, not philosophy. The philosophy of science.
I'm sorry. So you want me to compare the philosophy of science to what?
To science. I want you to tell me what the difference is.
The difference between the philosophy of science and science itself?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm really struggling to see how that goes into the debate and how that proves that my empirical data and my scientific method are not superior to philosophy in and of itself.
Well, look, just give me the benefit of the doubt. Describe to me the difference that you think there is between the philosophy of science and science itself. What's the difference?
Well, as we went over earlier, the philosophy of science is going to be the scientific method, right?
Yes. So is science not the application of the scientific method?
Is it not the application of that?
Yes, it is. So that's what I'm saying. If you apply philosophy to derive what you call scientific results, then those results are the results of the philosophical method that you applied, by definition.
Okay, but that goes back to exactly what we're talking about. Truth in and of itself, we have to look at in a way that we have to define it. And there's no scientific definition for truth outside of objective fact and objective results from using the scientific method. That is what a truth is to science. That is what a truth is to me, because I have more likelihood, there is a higher probability that I'm correct using the scientific method as opposed to sitting around and thinking about it through philosophy. The problem that you present by saying that you get to more effective truths or better truths through philosophy, one, is that you will not be able to get any testing. You can't test philosophy except really only in maybe a societal standpoint. That wouldn't even accomplish very much. But then two, you've got to sit there and assume that that philosophy was so effective before that's where science itself inherited.
Have you ever read the history of science?
And that's not true at all. Just because it originated, hold on. So just because it originated from philosophy doesn't mean that all the traits that science therefore has and the results it gets are from philosophy. That's like me saying that a professional basketball player, somebody in the NBA,
no, that's a false equivalency.
Their parents were just stellar basketball. That is not a false equivalence. What you're saying is the origins have to absolutely be the reason for the effectiveness.
Well, so actually you're wrong.
That's not true at all.
And I'll show you why you're wrong. Do you want me to explain?
Well, no, your origin. Okay, fine. If I'm wrong, then refute.
Yes.
I'll give you my point in one sentence and tell me if you can refute it. Okay. So my point is that your origins are not always and I want to hold on. I dropped my phone. So your origins, where you come from, will not dictate your effectiveness and all of your traits.
That is a false equivalency. I don't accept that as an equivalency. What I'm saying is, that you seem to draw a distinction in your mind between the application of science and the application of philosophy. You seem to think that science reaches better truths than philosophy. But the thing that you seem to completely misunderstand is that when you are applying science, that is the application of philosophy to the natural world. Okay, that is you using the philosophical thesis of verificationism to test your claims against the world, all right? And here's the way that you get refuted about the accuracy of science and it not being based on philosophy, okay? Do you know what the law of non-contradiction
I've used it 2 times in
Yes.
this debate,
So
yes.
how does falsification happen?
How does that have to do... What?
How
That would be like
falsification? Falsification.
That would be...
Okay.
That's not all of falsification. What you're asking me is to, number one, to answer your question, it's essentially a process of elimination type deal, but that's not all of falsification.
That's not what falsification is.
How do you... not simply process of elimination. Okay. You're not eliminating the non-truths to get to the one
I
truth.
don't agree.
That's not how that works.
That it's a process of elimination. Okay, how do you
Well, no, the question you were presenting to me. When you said...
No, what I'm asking you, can I just rephrase?
How does the law of non-contradiction fit?
Yeah, can I rephrase?
That's why I was weirded out, because you said, well, how does that play into it? That would only play in if you were going into a process of elimination.
I didn't say that. I asked you if you knew what it meant, and then I moved on. I didn't ask you how it fit in, all right? What I'm saying is, if I have an idea and I want to falsify it, how do I falsify one idea? Not multiple ideas, which may be a process of elimination. How do I falsify one idea? What is the method? Describe it to me.
There's a few methods. Science is the best way.
Nope, there's only one. There's only one way to falsify
something? Is that what you're saying? Okay,
that is what I'm saying. The method is to show that it is contradictory with something else that you accept or can demonstrate to be true. Obviously, all right? So when you say that you have falsified an idea, what you've done is you've taken the idea, you've compared it to the empirical data, and you've said, these contradict, therefore one of them is invalid. And insofar as you're justified to make that statement, you rely on the philosophical law of non-contradiction, which is philosophy. The accuracy of science inherits that truth of non-contradiction from philosophy. It doesn't come from anywhere else.
We're almost there. You're doing it. And I see exactly what you're doing, and I respect you, because you have these good coherent points going, and then you fall. So the reason you fell over there, again, was because you're trying to say that essentially this method relies on philosophy. In fact, I could take philosophy out of the equation, and if I were to hand the scientific method to people and say, use this, it will get you the objective truth, and like a brand new race of human beings, they have no idea what science is. I could hand them the scientific method, they would build just as quickly, if not quicker, than what we already have. If I hand them philosophy, they will not get to objective truths or the highest likelihood concepts. Is what I'll define that as, because like we said, there's no certainties, right? So what I'm saying is that the highest likelihood and the way to find the most probable, most likely concepts and answers and quote unquote truths is through that scientific method. I could actually take philosophy all the way out, teach people who don't know either one the scientific method, and they would still get to those same truths without knowing what philosophy is. Now, let's reverse it. If I give this totally out of wherever, these humans that don't know either one, if I give them philosophy instead, and they try to get to these truths, they're not going to.
Okay.
They're flat out not going to. They don't have a method to prove that these are the most likely concepts. They don't have a method to prove, oh, it's most probable that when I drop an apple off my balcony, gravity's going to work on it, or it's going to fall at a certain speed. You cannot use philosophy to understand how powerful gravity is, or that it's more powerful with more dense objects. You can't use philosophy for that. It won't happen. What you're essentially using is subjective logic, which is essentially what philosophy is. At the end of the day, I can use provability, I can use falsifiability, I can use a scientific method to test something over and over and over, and it's weird, because if I test something 100 times, and 100 times I get the same result, well, that's weird.
Interesting.
Probably true. It's probably the most likely outcome. It's probably the most likely outcome. And I know that simply by seeing it happen. That would be observation. That would be me observing a truth. I don't need philosophy.
You don't even need
really need logic. All I would really need to do is understand that, No, hold on. No, I don't need the type of logic that philosophy
Logic is the foundation of it.
Yeah, I'm going to retract that statement. That was dumb. You always need logic, of course. But you don't need philosophy to figure those things out. But if you were to take them, split them, and hand them to humans and say, go find me truths, you will find more truths using only science exclusively, as opposed to philosophy exclusively. So for the purposes of this debate, science and empirical truth and empirical data is technically, by definition, more likely to get you
that's
truth.
False.
That's all I'm saying.
So just quickly, you admitted you always need logic, all right? So just so you know, logic was developed by philosophy, and without philosophy, you don't actually have logic. It doesn't work. You come to invalid conclusions all the time. You're a very biased person. We developed logic in philosophy for the very purpose of sorting out what was true and what was false, because people are shit at reasoning, all right? So moving on, all right? Science is a tool. Do you agree with that?
Science is a tool? No.
Yes. Well, I mean, we use it, right? We utilize it for something.
Science is
right?
also categorized as a field of study. Science is also...
Yes.
Science
but how do we
use it? It's
how
not
do we
only
use
a tool. You can't limit it to only that.
Is it also a tool?
Can it be used as a tool? Yes.
Yes. Okay. So when you said
that's the right question.
So when you said we would give a new race of humans science, you meant we would give them science, the tool. Is that correct?
The scientific no, there would obviously need to be other things. We would teach them how to use the shit.
Oh, and how would we know that?
Science. We'd probably give them like the name science. We would say like, you know, you can test, I don't know, if round things roll better. I'm not even sure what your first test would be for that, but it would have to be something simple.
All right, so I'm confused exactly. Did you say, so we would be giving them a tool, but we would have to teach them how to use it. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, no. You would give them simply science. And it's not teaching them, like, necessarily how to run through it. Like, okay, it would be like if you said, I'm going to give them philosophy, I'm going to have to teach them to read fucking philosophy books. If I teach them how to do the scientific method and, like, or, like, write it down for them, I mean...
No, because you already admitted logic comes from philosophy. So just having the scientific wouldn't be...
Yeah, logically,
you'd still
I'm
make
going to
invalid
need to
conclusions.
how to use what I'm giving them. That's basic logic. They
but
need
where
to know how to use it.
Sorry, what domain is logic? Can you describe? What domain does logic come from?
I guess reasoning, a desire.
Yes,
to get
and
to
what's
truth.
reasoning? What is reasoning called, technically speaking?
A desire to get to objective truth.
No, it's called philosophy. All right. So
is that
quickly,
the definition of reason?
No, reason is something that was like outlined in philosophy. We didn't have reasoning until we had thought.
We didn't have
Aristotle
reasoning until the concept of philosophy now.
People tried to reason. They sucked at it. That's why we came up with rules. The rules,
That's
what you're
absurd.
referring.
That's absurd.
No,
what
it's
you
not.
Just said.
It's not. We came up with rules.
Because I'll happily tell you why.
I wasn't done, but
so
sure.
You do understand animals reason, right?
Yes. You do understand they don't do it. No, stop.
Has any animal ever studied philosophy ever?
Just quickly. You do understand that animals don't reason very well.
Skirt away. No, I got it. Okay, what do you want to skirt away to?
Animals don't reason very well. Do you admit that?
Absolutely. What are you talking about? They don't reason well. You know, if they don't reason well, they don't survive, right?
No, actually, that's not true. Okay, there's lots of mistakes in reasoning that don't compromise your survival. Not all the time, for instance. Okay, for instance, a selection bias. That's a subjective bias. Or animals have selection biases. Animals have confirmation biases. These are actually invalid methods of evaluating something. Okay, that's why we call them a bias. All right. So when animals reason about the world, they are blindly subject to their biases. They don't know how to articulate the fact that they have biases to begin with, and they don't know how to compensate for them. So the proposition that animals reason well. Well, okay. So anyway, the proposition then that animals reason well would seem to be contradicted by your other proposition, which is that when we gave this new race of humans science, that we would need to explain to them how to use it. Wouldn't they just intuitively know?
So reasoning well, let's define that real quick. Do you know what reasoning well means for an animal?
I know what reasoning well means for humans. Okay, so let's just use that definition.
Reasoning well for an animal, what that's going to result in is them surviving.
Okay, yes, but you understand that humans reason better.
Well,
do you understand?
Do you know what an animal's life is about? Like an animal in the wild. Yes. You know it's about survival, right?
Yes.
And reproduction.
Yes.
That's great. So if you achieve your life's goal through reasoning, are you not reasoning well?
You're reasoning well enough to survive.
You're reasoning well enough to achieve your life's goal. The fact that it's survival that's a non sequitur.
It's not a non sequitur. It's actually topically related to what you said. Okay, and let's actually think about this for a second.
Okay, fine.
Let's think about this for a second.
Superficially related to what I said in terminology.
Let's think about this for a second. Okay, you said that animals reason well just because their reasoning process gives them the result they want sometimes.
Sometimes?
Yeah, obviously some animals die
So this
because they
isn't a
don't
consistent basis
understand.
for you.
What? It's animals
Animals don't reason
constantly
well
listen
on
to
a
me.
consistent
Listen
basis?
to me.
Is that what you're trying to
No,
say?
yes, correct. That is exactly accurate. Yes.
Okay. So in what species that's been around on Earth? Let's say crocodiles.
Mhm.
Now, you probably know crocodiles have been around since prehistoric,
Mhm.
dinosaurs and shit.
Yep.
Great. So why is it inconsistent? And what's inconsistent about the reasoning? How are they not surviving well enough?
Well,
How are they not surviving inconsistently?
Well, let me put it to you this way, okay? A crocodile doesn't know if a tornado is coming, and a human does. And how is that, do you?
Because it doesn't need to. Why would it
No,
need
obviously, why wouldn't it need to? It could die. It could die.
to?
They do
It lives
die.
in a swamp.
Animals die. No,
Are there
animals
tornadoes
die
in Florida?
Listen to me. Animals die in natural events, okay? A tornado is an example of a natural event, all right? The fact of the matter is that natural events kill animals. They impair survival. So, whether or not you can accurately predict that a natural event is going to occur actually is relevant to your survival. And if you can't, then you don't reason well enough,
that is
okay? And the
inaccurate.
fact that
What you're
humans
saying is
can
then
predict
absurd.
it.
We're moving into absurdity. So
Listen
I will
to me.
indulge.
You didn't let me finish, man, okay? If
Okay,
humans can make a prediction of that sort, then it seems reasonable to me to make a comparative assessment and say animals can reason, but humans reason better than animals do.
That's great. So I will give you that point in your absurdity rant. I will give you that point. We reason better than animals.
That was ad hominem, man.
That's great. So what I'm saying is essentially they're achieving their life's goal with their reasoning. So they're doing it fine. They're doing it
Not all
consistently
of
because they
them.
continue to survive. Hold on, I'll let you finish. So they're doing it consistently because they are surviving consistently. They continue to adapt through adaptation, and I'm sure you know all about Darwinism and Darwin, all of that. Anyway, so the problem that you're bringing up here is that you're saying, well, if they can't avoid these natural occurrences that could kill them, they're not reasoning well enough. Well, that's just kind of funny to me because there's plenty of people that die in hurricanes, in tornadoes, in thunderstorms, in earthquakes, and a whole host of other natural events kill humans almost, every year.
So?
Ain't that weird? So, and then let's just talk about something else. Let's say a comet comes to our planet bigger than our sun. It's going to wipe us out. We cannot survive that. So we're not reasoning well enough by your standards because we cannot avoid.
How do you know that's a proposition that you're making about capacity to deal with a problem? You don't have any evidence of that.
That's the assertion you presented to me.
You don't have any evidence
get out of natural events that can kill you. You're not reasoning well enough.
I don't think you understand me. Okay, there are some natural events that you can't get out of, and some you can. Okay, and animals fail to get out of the ones that they have the information to inform themselves about because they don't know how to reason correctly. All right, that's a fact. And if you say that reasoning well, stop. If you say that reasoning well
claim and expect me
to
stay quiet on that.
Listen, man, I'm still talking.
You're
okay?
making false claims, though.
If you say that good reasoning is justified by the fact that the animal survives, I'm going to have to point out to you that most of them die.
Okay,
that's called survival of the fittest.
Dies.
Most of animals die.
There you go.
Yes, most of animals die prematurely. Do you accept that?
Oh, wait, so humans don't die prematurely?
Of course they do. That is not relevant. The point is,
we're not even reasoning better than them by your standards.
Stop. Okay.
Would you like me to tell you why we reason better than them?
Look, you made a proposition. The proposition you made was that humans do not reason better than animals. Okay.
That's not at all
because
what
when
I said.
Actually, it is what you said to begin with. Yeah, you agreed with me afterwards. Okay, but the point is that you're still trying to demonstrate through a false equivalency that because humans die as well, we must not reason properly. That's actually invalid reasoning.
No, I'm using
it's
your
a fallacy.
Reasoning.
Right?
No,
you're not. You think you are. You think you are. You are, but you're not.
I can give you verbatim what you said and then use that. Will that work for you?
You are applying it in a way it doesn't make sense. The reason it doesn't make sense is what I'm saying is. What I'm saying is,
or is it me not getting it perfect?
What I'm saying is essentially that when an animal has access to the information that it could use to inform itself about a natural disaster and avoid it, and it fails to do so, it's because it doesn't understand how. And when a human has access to that same information, it makes the correct deduction and then removes itself from danger. Okay, that benefit to survivability demonstrates the superior reasoning ability of human to an animal.
I'm glad you spent another 5-10 ramble minutes explaining that we have better reasoning.
Stop being pejorative.
I'm not being pejorative. That's so
Don't
rude.
tell me I'm rambling.
Not doing that at all.
Do not tell me I'm rambling. Don't say it.
You were. I thought it'd be like polite to tell you. It's
no,
like when
it wasn't polite. You were trying to be rude.
I tell them that too.
You were trying to be rude. I don't appreciate it.
Okay, I won't say that again. I won't say you're rambling again.
Good.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm saying is that by your standard, you said that because they cannot avert, they can't avert their own deaths in these events, these natural occurrences, they're not reasoning well enough.
Nope, not what I said.
The issue with that is we can't either.
Not what I said. That's a false equivalence. That isn't what I said. What I said was...
Let's go back to the recording.
No. We can't yet, because it's still recording. I'll tell you exactly what I said, all right?
That's fine.
What I said, we can't. We would have to stop the debate. What I said was,
I think it's pretty clear where this is going.
You're not listening to me. You're not listening, all right? What I said was that if a human can deduce something from its information and remove itself from danger in a situation where the danger is avoidable, but an animal fails to do so in the same situation with the same variables, that demonstrates observably that the human knows how to reason better than the animal, and the only way that reasoning is better than the animal is through the principles of logic that were formally developed by Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates in classical philosophy by the Greeks long before your science came out of their philosophical thinking. They established categorically what it meant to say something in a valid way and what it meant to say something in an invalid way, all right? And the fact that we then managed to propose a method to conduct science by, which is valid, follows directly from their definitions of what counts as valid. And you have to admit that, because it does.
Again, it's going back to humans pursuing truth through this, right? And
yes.
I mean, logically, a reasonable person wants the truth. That's great. So philosophically, that's where it ends, because philosophy is not going to give you that truth. That's like me saying, okay, as a guy, I have an urge to like work out or eat or punch things or whatever. I would use I would use science to say that I'm hungry and angry and I want to bang every girl. I wonder why. I'm going to go get checked out, run a few things through science and that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to find out that I have a hormone called testosterone. How would I find that hormone?
Well, you see, you would apply the theories of verificationism and the principle of falsification, which is an extension of the law of non-contradiction, to your empirical environment, which is what philosophy is actually about considering. Natural philosophy is about the environment, all right? You apply the principles of philosophy to the information that exists in your environment. You use it to deduce a valid conclusion, and that is what you are calling a scientific conclusion, all right?
How do I know that I have hormones without science?
Can I just quickly ask you a question, man? Can I just quickly ask you a question?
Well, you can definitely dodge these questions.
How many philosophy books have you read?
How many? It's irrelevant.
Yes. No, it's not. Is the number more than 0?
Well, yes, but I'm not.
Well, what's the book? Tell me one book.
Which one? I'm reading biocentrism right now.
No, I'm asking about what philosophical.
I just gave you one.
Biocentrism is modern empirical science, in your opinion, right?
Biocentrism is.
Well, in your opinion,
you understand
that's what you say.
I'll link you the book. Hold on. I'll link you the book, and I'll ask you if you can say that same thing you just said. Here you go.
I guess I'm just a bit confused about why you'd read something that couldn't help you get to what was true. It seems a bit pointless to me, like you said yourself. Like,
well, I just tried
philosophy doesn't help you get to what's true. What's the point?
That I'm interested in.
Like
I'm
what?
sorry that I have some interest in philosophy.
Can you explain what?
Hold on. I like to expand my sphere of competence. I'm sure you've heard that term before, and I'm sure you've heard people say that.
So what are
So
you
is there
expanding it
something
into?
objectively or subjectively wrong with that motive?
No, I'm asking you, what exactly is it that you have to gain from philosophy, in your opinion?
In my opinion,
Yes.
I mean, my opinion is not really an objective truth by any means.
Actually,
And that's what
your
this debate's
opinion,
about, but that's fine.
your opinion is on trial. That's what a debate is.
My opinion is on trial. No,
Correct.
I'm proving that I know how to get to truth better than, well, not better than you, because you just took a stance. So I don't actually know if this is how you normally do it. But your stance is, I don't know, I've been able to demonstrate that I can get to better and more provable and more likely and more probable results through science as opposed to just using philosophy.
Yeah, so
I even gave you the example of if you were to introduce philosophy or science to two cultures that don't know the other one, the opposite, they would get to these truths and these probabilities much faster through science. And then through philosophy, there are truths they wouldn't get to at all. And I gave you that with the hormone example. And you weren't able to show me you weren't able to demonstrate how to get to hormones. You would not know in human nature or in human philosophy or through any amount of reasoning that we have hormones.
Incorrect.
Without
Okay,
science.
and first of all, you didn't actually answer my question at all. Right? I asked you a question. The question was, what do you have to gain from philosophy, in your opinion? Please answer as succinctly as you can.
That?
Yes, answer the question.
What do I have to gain from philosophy? I mean, it helps me. I guess it helps me be more open to new ideas, I guess, and new paths of thought. That would be the simplest way I can say that.
So when you're saying being more open to new ideas, why do you value that?
Why do I value that?
Yes.
I would imagine if I'm open to new truths and new results and new facts, I mean, I will probably receive them better, understand them, and comprehend them faster.
So philosophy does have something to do with truth after all, then?
It makes me more open to certain truths, but I guess.
I mean, what's the difference between that and relating to truth?
What?
What's the difference between that and relating to truth?
Relating to truth.
Yes, there's a relationship. There is a relationship that exists, in your opinion, between philosophy and what's true.
We've discussed the relationship. I even agreed with you. I even agreed that science originates from philosophy, and therefore they share a pretty close relationship. And I mean, I'm not sure what new information you're trying to get out of me.
I guess
ask me what you're trying to get out. I will gladly answer.
Let me try and put it into an example. Does it make sense to you to say that when you have a child, that you can consider the child completely independent of its genetic evolution?
I don't know. I'd have to test and see.
No. I'm asking you, does it make sense to you as reasonable that if you examine physiologically and biologically a child, would it make sense to ignore the genetic history?
How would I know the genetic history or know what genetic history is without science?
That's not the point. That isn't the question I asked you. Please answer the question. Please answer the question.
I can't answer a question that is not founded within. Oh my goodness! How do I answer it without science? How about that? How do I answer it with philosophy?
That is a redirect, and it's a non sequitur. Answer the question.
It's not. It's not it's neither of those things. That's
You're
two
refusing.
false claims right there.
You're refusing.
I'm not using false claims in this debate. I want that on record, Trini.
You are refusing to answer the question. You realize that? You are refusing to answer the question.
Which question?
The question that I asked you about whether it makes sense to you as a rational adult, to consider a child, examine them biologically and physiologically, and yet exclude the genetic history that led to the child's evolution.
Well, I'm just
Does
wondering,
that make sense to you?
Because I understand.
Again, you're posing a question.
How do I do that with philosophy?
Please don't. Please look. Please don't ask me a question. I asked you to answer. Answer me.
Okay, I will give you an answer. The answer is that I can't make that determination without science.
Okay. So you gave a non sequitur response.
How is that a non sequitur?
Because I asked you a direct question and you didn't answer it.
I do want to hear that.
Yes, okay. So when you say I can't make that determination without science, I never said you had to exclude science. You can have science, man. Make your fucking determination. I asked you to answer a question.
I would say that
fucking answer
science.
it.
Would you agree? I mean,
I would say that it's up to you what you need. It's not relevant. It isn't
it's not relevant to understand the physiologic. You're telling me I don't need science to understand physiology or the genetic history of this child?
No.
You're telling me I don't need science.
No. What I said was,
good, because I was going to say you were
listen to me. What I said was, if you want to use science, go ahead. Now answer my fucking question, okay? Is it reasonable
No need to be
to
hostile.
consider the physiological and biological characteristics of a human being while ignoring their genetic evolution? Is that reasonable?
Is that reasonable? I don't know. How do you measure reasonable?
Yeah, well, I would say the answer is no. Okay, that's the answer I'm looking for. The answer is no. I think most scientists would honestly agree with me that the answer is no. And following from that, okay, what we get is that the history of something is fundamentally part of what it is now. And that's a pretty, that's a sound claim, because the history of physics is what led to the physics we have now. The history of chemistry is what led to the chemicals we have now.
Yeah.
And the history of biology and genetics is what led to the genetics we have now. Okay, so the scientific truth.
I agree that all of those scientific histories are exactly right. I agree with all of those.
The scientific truth that you derive now from empirical philosophy has its roots in philosophy itself, and you cannot consider, yes, you cannot consider empirical philosophy, or what you would call science, in any sense separate to philosophy, because that is its root. It depended on its history.
You fell over again. So the reason there's a disconnect here. What you're not understanding is that you can come from something, right? You can, let's say a bird comes from a fish. That's how evolution worked for some fucking reason. That bird no longer has gills. It can't breathe underwater. However, it can fly. Now, that ability to fly did not come from the fish just because it originated from the fish and evolved from a fish. Because that fish can't fly either. It doesn't have wings.
I'll tell you what.
Just because you have roots in something doesn't mean you are still that thing. It doesn't mean that the traits you develop and the traits that you can then display are from that original source. It doesn't matter, because the source of the trait is you, not the origins of you.
Okay,
you
so
yourself.
Let me just deal with that claim. Okay, you just said that just because the trait itself didn't come from one specific step in the evolutionary process, that thus it's disassociated from that step in a fundamental sense. And that's actually inaccurate, all right? Because any traits developed by a fish after it was a fish is a trait developed in its evolutionary timeline, okay? And the fact that it developed the ability to fly is consistent with the progression from fish. That is true. The fact that it is consistent with the progression from fish shows that being consistent with where you came from is the only way that you make sense now, okay? It's only sensible that I'm a human being insofar as my genetics are consistent with the genetic history of humans, okay? So as long as I can show that my DNA fits the genealogy of humans consistently, the fact that any specific step didn't have a trait that I'm not done.
Can you show that consistency using only philosophy?
Listen, man, that again is a non sequitur, and I wasn't done, all right? If I can say, listen to me, if I can say that just because it means it doesn't logically follow, okay? If I know, for instance, that I used to be a fish, all right, then even if some of the traits that I have now were not inherited from fish directly, they were inherited in a consistent sense in the progression from fish to what I am, right? Which demonstrates quite clearly. Okay, explain that.
Okay, so let's go back to Darwin, right? And adaptation. I'm sure I don't need to explain any of that to you, right? You understand, like, kind of the basics on it?
Yes.
Cool. So, adaptation dictates that you will develop traits that are most advantageous to thriving and surviving with your environment and responding in a positive and productive way to stimuli around you that you will consistently face.
Interesting.
So,
can I just quickly ask a clarifying question?
Hold on. Wait. I'll let you. I'm not going to say ramble.
No,
I'll let you talk.
I just wanted you to clarify something. That's all.
You weren't rambling. I don't want to hurt your feelings on that one. You were talking for a while. I did let you go on that. So what I'm saying is that the origins don't matter. Should the environment change for that fish to where it needs to fly, it's going to fucking fly. So should humans have a desire for more likely results and finding things that are closer to absolute truths? Like, maybe something you could get from science. People will then move away from philosophy because they had reasoning originally, right? And reasoning was the best thing we had to get to those results, to get to truths. And then we developed out of our need to know, we went from reasoning to actual science, so we could test things, so we could see if we were right about our reasoning, about our logic. And then, should science find something that contradicts our logic, are we going to go with the philosophical answer, the original logic and reasoning, or are we going to go with what science
I'll quickly
has
answer
proven to
that,
be
and
true?
then I'm going to deal with a mistake that you made earlier that I tried to clarify, but you didn't really give me an opportunity, all right? So, the whole point of philosophy is that philosophy adapts to correction. That's the reason that science has that property, is because when we were wrong, we changed. When people could show that our reasoning was invalid, we changed. That is an application of the law of non-contradiction, and it is merely an extension of that into our testing of the ideas against the empirical world. It's the extension of the law of non-contradiction that enables us to change now, all right? So now quickly, to return to the thing that you said earlier about genetics, all right? I have to think for a sec so I can gather exactly what it was.
I'm still here. I'm just trying not to interrupt.
Yeah, it's all good. I don't quite remember. Could you reiterate for me your opinion on evolution? No, that's right. That's right. Yeah. No, I got it again. Okay. So, could you please explain to me? You said adaptation, which is, in fact, you're right, a sort of a principle of natural selection and evolution by Darwinism. All right. Now, can you please describe the time frame over which life adapts?
Depends.
Physically. What is the time frame life has to go through to adapt a physical adaptation to the environment? How long?
Depends on the species.
Is it in a lifetime? Is it in a lifetime?
In a single lifetime? Absolutely, motherfucking not.
Exactly.
No, not
all right.
close.
Yes. So you were making an equivalency.
There are adaptations people can make throughout life. I just want that on record.
No, but you made an equivalency between those two adaptations, and you seem not to understand that there is a difference between an evolved adaptation that emerges over genetic variation and survival of the fittest, and a dynamic adaptation, which is a conscious process where you adapt dynamically to the environment around you in the moment, in your lifetime, in an hour perhaps. And there is a real difference between the two. They are both adaptation, but they are not the same kind of adaptation. Yes. So when you were making the argument about how life forms adapt, the thing that you're failing to get is, yes, they adapt, but they adapt through the process of genetic variation and natural selection. And so when we do genetics, when we trace genealogy, when we compare our DNA to the DNA of our ancestors, it is consistent because the variations emerged over many lifetimes. That's why it's consistent historically, okay? Much harder to be consistent in the moment when you don't have something tracking every move you make. But fortunately for you, that's what DNA does do, all right? So we can measure empirically the fact that what you are now is fundamentally linked to what you were then, and the way that it is linked to that is that it is consistent that you developed the traits you have now from what you were then. Even if you were a fish then, even if you have wings now, the fact that you developed them in the process of evolving through history doesn't make it true that you had to necessarily inherit the wings from the fish.
Yeah, I actually like your analogy because it actually is pretty close.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question then, right?
What we've been talking about
listen,
philosophy.
Listen, okay?
Okay, I'll let you go.
So, what traits you develop now are the product of what you were then, even if what you were then was a fish. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely incorrect.
That is correct. That's what genealogy is. That's how it's
incorrect. You could not be more wrong with that.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. So, I've been waiting for this. So, the reason you are incorrect, my good sir, the reason you have to understand that fish has nothing to do with that bird flying.
Wrong.
Right?
It's genetically connected.
The fact of the matter, that original fish, the last one that was in the water, has nothing to do with that bird flying. The reason being, all it did was simply exist to originate that species that would later.
But you said it's nothing to do with it, isn't it?
Lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, thousands of years after that fish is dead, decomposed, and gone. Philosophy could die, decompose, and be gone today. Science will not grieve. Science will actually find more truths. However, should science die, I can guarantee you, philosophy only has so far to go because it is limited by human reasoning as we understand it. And in fact, our reasoning cannot progress without science because we cannot grow our understanding of the world around us without science. We can to a degree with philosophy, to a degree. However, with science, we can test almost everything. We can test almost anything in the universe through science. With philosophy, we have to go by our reasoning. And to completely rely on that would be to rely on human comprehension to comprehend absolutely everything we could possibly encounter within our reality, which is just absurd to think. No, I wanted to let you go on that one.
No. So, like, basically, that was again, okay. So, like, I said that basically the fish has something to do with what you are now. If you were originally a fish, you said no. That's on record. This is being recorded. You said no. As far as I know, being the origin of something is having something to do with what we are now. Being the origin is a relationship. It's a consistent relationship. All right? That's a fact. Yep. So you can't actually say no, that the fish has nothing to do with what we are now. Factually incorrect, according to every geneticist you will ever talk to, right? And what that does, and the reason that you're being so obstinate on this point, is that if you admit to me that the history of something is necessarily relevant to what it is now, then you would have to concede on the main point, which is that the history of science being philosophy means that philosophy is inherently relevant to what science produces
Okay, fine.
now.
Let me refute that. So the origins are somewhat relevant. Also,
how are they relevant? How are they relevant?
They are. I'm agreeing with that point because you just kind of threw a challenge my way. I'm not going to concede the original point because even if philosophy is relevant to science, which it is to some degree, it's
could you
philosophy at the end of the day is reasoning. We use reasoning to understand the results we get in science. That's great. There's some relevancy. Hold on. There is some relevancy there, and there's also relevance because it originates from philosophy, like I said. However, the point of this debate is which one will get us to more truths, which one will help us understand our reality better. Science will do that. Science will do it. You have admitted it's more effective. You have admitted. Hold on. You have also admitted that I can get to more likely results through science as opposed to philosophy because philosophy is simply reasoning. But with science, I can actually test it over and over and over. If I test something 100 times as opposed to think about something 100 times, which one, in your opinion, is more likely to be true? Me thinking about it 100 times?
The only way that you come up with the method of testing is by thinking about it, all right? And so first of all, let's just go over what you said, all right? What you said just then was that it is related in two ways, okay? Reasoning we use to evaluate results, so related in that way, and it's the history of science, so it's related in another way. So then my question is, okay, because the point of the debate is not what you said it was. The point of the debate is what is truth, all right? So, all right, when we say then that you make an assertion that science and philosophy are somehow disconnected entities, you just admitted that they weren't utterly disconnected. They are related, all right? So now I'm going to ask you to qualify that relationship for me.
Do you mean quantify and essentially?
How would I qualify
this?
Yeah, maybe if you'd read a book on classical philosophy, you might know this, but qualification is to do with describing, well, really, what book?
Huh?
Which book?
Oh, no, I couldn't even name one. That one. I refused to answer.
I bet you couldn't even name one.
I bet you could. Oh, I'm sorry. Name the last philosophy book you read.
Yeah, The Republic.
The Republic.
Yep.
Okay, well, I see why this debate's going the way it is. So.
Oh, because I read Plato, I'm an idiot. Real logical. Let's just get back to the point of the argument, okay?
I'm just saying.
Stop.
Okay.
You asked me if I meant.
My opinion, because you know it's going to be that one was going to be a little.
No, it's irrelevant. Okay. The point is, you asked me if I meant quantify. No, I don't mean quantify, and it seems like I'm going to have to explain to you what the difference is. Quantify means to describe the quantity of. I'm pretty sure you don't know the difference.
Ooh.
Quantify
that's rude. All
means
I said was you were rambling. Are you mad at me for that still?
Listen, man. Quantify has to
Okay,
do
so
with the number
don't
or
answer
quantity
sentences, I'll make you look
of
bad, I get it.
an element, all right? Some variable. Quantify has to do with the quantity or number.
Mhm.
Qualify has to do with characteristics and properties.
Why
now,
would I need a
I would like
philosophy
you
book
to
to
do
understand that? That's
because
not even in the same
because
field.
I would like you to explain
That
to me,
doesn't answer my
describe to me the relationship that exists between science and
I
philosophy.
explained
Describe it. No, describe them. You can't just say they're related. How are they related?
Oh my God.
Describe them.
I told you 2 reasons. I told you 2 whys.
No,
I answered your why twice.
I don't think you understand.
You want me to do
I'm
it again?
asking.
Fine, I'll do it again. I'll do it
What?
again. You need
No. Stop.
reasoning to
Stop. You're not
understand the
listening to
results you
me.
will get from
You're
the
not
scientific method.
listening.
And I'm answering your question.
No,
How am I
you're
not
not.
listening?
You're repeating
I'm clearly
yourself.
listening because I've
You are
comprehended
repeating
what
yourself.
you're responding.
You're repeating
I'm
yourself.
responding as prompted.
No.
How am I not
No.
listening?
Because you're
You asked
repeating
me a
yourself.
question.
You didn't understand my question if you thought that it was a prompt to repeat yourself.
Okay, Matt, what was your question?
My question was, describe the relationship that exists between science and philosophy. Don't just say that there is one.
Okay, now no luck.
Cool.
Answer, Matt, don't interrupt him. Go.
So, the relationship is that, 1, you need reasoning to understand the results you will get from the scientific method. The second part to this relationship is that science does originate from philosophy. Those are my 2 answers to why and what the relationship is. I'm done.
That's not a valid answer. The reason that's not a valid answer is that you don't describe whether or not they're consistent. Are you saying then that science is consistent with reasoning? Because that would make science and philosophy consistent. Or are you saying then that science is historically consistent with philosophy? Because that's the relationship between science and its history, all right? So is it consistent or is it inconsistent? You said there's a relationship. I'd like you to describe it.
I feel like I have now twice. I don't want to.
I don't feel like you have. I'm prompting you to do it again better.
Better. Well, if you didn't like it, I'm sorry. Please file a complaint with customer service or training. I don't know. Okay. I actually have to go.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go here. We can call this debate right now. We can end it here, and whoever's winning right now just wins.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, mate.
Yeah, you are a worthy opponent. You do not crack as easily as everyone else. One of my strategies is to try to agitate people, and you are not easily flustered.
Interesting that you'd say that, because not many people do that.
Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and join us in the Nameless Debates Discord. We hope to see you there.